You won't believe what my own granddaughter did to me. After all the sacrifices I made. The sleepless nights holding her while she cried over broken hearts. The money I poured into celebrating her biggest moments. She called me basic. And that was only the beginning. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure to subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. This story is going to sit heavy with you. I never imagined I'd become the villain in my own family's narrative. It didn't happen all at once. It crept in slowly, through quiet dismissals, unreturned calls, and thankless gestures that piled up over the years. Then came Madison, my first granddaughter, the same baby I used to rock to sleep against my chest. She decided I was too basic for her bridal shower. She didn't say it to my face. That would have required honesty. She said it in a group text, one I was accidentally left in. They were finalizing details for the bridal shower. The bridal shower I was paying for, with money from my retirement. I had spared no expense. Custom linen napkins with her monogram. A floral arch flown in from Savannah. A vineyard-style venue tucked into the Blue Ridge Mountains. Everything she wanted. Then I read the message. Can we make sure Grandma doesn't show up in her usual Kohl's outfit? This vibe is luxury, not basic. Another message followed. She gives cafeteria lady energy. Then my own daughter, Claire, chimed in. Let's just tell her we're keeping it small. She'll understand. My hands started shaking. At first, I tried to make excuses for them. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe it wasn't meant for me. But my name was right there. So was the cruelty. I sat alone in my kitchen, the tea kettle screaming on the stove, until I realized I'd forgotten it entirely. I didn't cry. Instead, I smiled. A hollow smile I didn't recognize. I typed one message. Wishing you all the best, sweetheart. Hope it's everything you dreamed of. Then I made a phone call. Hello, this is Eleanor McCarthy. I'd like to cancel the reservation for June 14th. No reschedule. Just cancel. The woman on the line was shocked. She offered to waive the cancellation fee. I told her not to worry. I had other plans for the money. That evening, I boxed up the party favors and labeled them for donation. I transferred the refunded money into my charity account and sent every cent to a women's shelter nearby. I included a note. In honor of every woman who was told she was too basic to belong. I told no one. The morning of the bridal shower arrived bright and warm. I sat across the street from the now empty venue, sipping iced tea from my thermos. Cars pulled in. Heels clicked. Pastel dresses fluttered. Then panic. Phones came out. Doors rattled. Voices rose. I heard Madison before I saw her. What do you mean it's canceled? My grandma booked this. Her face burned red with embarrassment. I watched for a moment, then quietly walked away. I expected guilt. Instead, I felt peace, like I'd finally taken a full breath after years underwater. A few days later, the calls began. First, Claire. Mom, what happened to the shower? I wouldn't know, I said calmly, folding laundry. I wasn't invited. Silence. You didn't have to cancel it, she finally said. But I did, I replied. It was mine to cancel. After that, nothing. Just sharp, uncomfortable silence. I didn't expect apologies. Maybe I never would. Soon whispers spread around town. Eleanor McCarthy ruined her granddaughter's bridal shower. Funny how no one ever asked why I gave so much. Why I sat alone in church. Why my family never mentioned me online, even when I stood 2 feet away. They only noticed me when I stopped giving. That week I began a journal. Not just about the shower but about everything. The marriage. The lies. The family secrets I'd carried like burning coals for decades. Each night I wrote until my hands ached. I didn't know what I'd do with those pages. I only knew I was done pretending. I had been quiet for far too long. Something inside me was waking up. Then came the knock, just after sunset. I thought it might be my neighbor Martha, with her usual cobbler. But when I opened the door, it was a stranger. A woman in her early 30s. Wide-eyed. A camera bag on one shoulder, a dusty backpack on the other. Mrs. McCarthy? She asked gently. Yes, I replied, keeping the screen door closed. My name is Lily, she said. I'm working on a documentary about women like you. I raised an eyebrow. Women over 60, she continued nervously, who gave everything. and were erased by their families. She swallowed. A woman at the shelter in Charlotte gave me your name. She said you saved her life. My breath caught. It had been years since anyone said that. And in that moment I realized, this was only the beginning. I remembered her instantly. The woman Lily mentioned. Marianne. She'd arrived at the shelter years ago with a baby balanced on her hip, bruises blooming along her arm like dark violets. I'd sat with her that night, held her shaking hand, and told her something she didn't yet believe, that she was strong enough to begin again. I hadn't heard from her since. I opened the door wider. Come in, Lily. We sat at my kitchen table, the same floral vinyl tablecloth I'd owned for decades between us, sipping lemon tea as she quietly set up her recorder. She didn't rush me. She waited patiently, as if she understood that some stories need permission from the heart before they can be spoken. So I told her everything, the first lie. How it began harmlessly, working late, forgotten anniversaries, excuses wrapped in charm. And how it slowly grew heavier. Darker. I told her about the hotel key I once found in his suit jacket, and how, when I confronted him, he laughed. Don't be dramatic, Ellie, he'd said. You always turn nothing into something. I told her about the night I finally left. No screaming. No slammed doors. Just quiet certainty. One suitcase. My wedding ring placed gently on the dresser. He didn't try to stop me. Not once. You were married for 35 years? Lily asked softly. 35 years, I replied. 3 children, and a lifetime of being unseen. Her eyes filled with tears. Then, without planning to, I asked a question that surprised even me. Why are you really here, Lily? She blinked. I told you. The documentary. No, I said, leaning forward. You knew my full name. That didn't come from Marianne alone. Her gaze dropped to her teacup. Her hands began to tremble. I'm her daughter, she whispered. Marianne's. The room went still. You held me when I was a baby, she continued. I don't remember it, but she does. She said you were the reason she found the strength to leave. My father says you saved her life. My throat tightened. I wanted to find you, Lily said, her voice breaking. To thank you. And to help you tell your story. For a long moment I couldn't speak. Then I reached across the table and took her hand. You already are, sweetheart. In the days that followed, Lily and I grew close. Faster than I ever expected. She stayed in the guest room, filmed interviews in the garden, on the porch, in the kitchen where so many quiet battles had been lost. She helped me scan old letters, sort photographs, unearth court papers I'd buried deep in drawers. But more than that, she helped me remember myself. Not just a mother, not just a wife, not just a grandmother, but Eleanor, the girl who loved poetry, who once dreamed of teaching, who danced barefoot in the rain at 21 and kissed her high school sweetheart in the back of a red Ford pickup. That girl was still there, and Lily reminded me that my story wasn't finished. One evening she came downstairs, eyes glowing with an idea. I want to host a dinner, she said. Invite your family. We'll say it's for the documentary, honoring the McCarthy legacy. They'll come for the cameras. I stared at her. You want me to confront them? No, she said firmly. I want you to reclaim your voice. Fear flickered inside me. Habit maybe. Years of shrinking myself. But I was tired of silence, tired of folding inward, tired of pretending their indifference didn't wound me. I nodded. Let's do it. Lily went to work with fierce determination. She booked a private dining room at a historic inn just outside town. Printed gold foil invitations. Even hired a photographer. Everyone assumed the evening was about them. Their legacy. Their image. They had no idea. As the date approached, old doubts crept in. What if they laughed? What if they walked out? What if they twisted my words the way they always had? Then I remembered something Lily had said that first night. You don't need their permission to matter. And just like that, the fear dissolved. I was ready. The inn sat beneath sweeping willow trees, glowing with soft golden lights, straight out of a Southern Living magazine. A place thick with memory. I'd attended weddings there. Baby showers. An anniversary party long ago, when my children still thought I was worth celebrating. Now I stood in the grand dining room, watching staff place name cards along a long mahogany table, my heart pounding like it wanted to escape my chest. Lily adjusted her camera in the corner, dressed sharp and confident. She gave me a small nod. "This is your stage, Eleanor." I smoothed my navy dress with shaking hands, the same one I'd worn to Madison's high school graduation. Back then, she'd said I looked elegant, and I hadn't heard that word in years. The guests arrived in clusters. Claire came first, perfect as always. Pearl earrings, silk scarf, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Her husband followed, already glued to his phone. Madison arrived soon after, laughing too loudly, arm in arm with her fiancé, Evan. She looked stunning, flawless makeup, designer dress, youth and money woven into every detail. She glanced around, confused. "Wait, this isn't a restaurant?" "We reserved the room privately for the documentary," Lily said smoothly. "A tribute to the McCarthy family matriarch." That caught their attention. "Oh, how lovely," Claire said instantly, slipping into performance mode. "We're honored, aren't we, Maddie?" "Of course," Madison replied, smiling tightly. The rest trickled in, my two sons, cousins, old friends. Polite smiles. Small talk. Oblivious. We took our seats. Plates clinked. Wine flowed. Conversation skimmed the surface, safe, shallow, meaningless. Claire kept positioning herself toward the camera whenever she spoke. Then Lily gave me the signal. I stood. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight." I began, my voice softer than I intended. "This means more to me than you realize." They looked up, surprised. "For years," I continued, "I've played a role in this family that I never auditioned for. I was the quiet one, the giver, the one who stayed behind, making sure casseroles filled the freezer and Christmas cards were mailed on time." I took a slow, steady breath. "But I was also the one who was forgotten," I continued. "Silenced. Set aside. And lately, I've been asking myself something painful. If a woman gives everything she has to the people she loves, and they forget who she is, did she ever truly exist to them at all?" The table went completely still. Even forks paused midair. Claire let out a nervous laugh. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the bridal shower." Madison stiffened. "I paid for everything," I said, turning toward her. "The flowers, the food, the venue. I wanted it to be perfect for you. And in return I was called basic. Embarrassing. Someone to be hidden." "Grandma, that was private," Madison said quickly, her face flushing. "But it wasn't private to me," I replied calmly. "I read every word. And I canceled the shower. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. For the first time I saw how invisible I had become." Silence swallowed the room. One of my sons cleared his throat. "I'm sure she didn't mean it." "Didn't mean it?" My voice rose, steady but burning now. "What about the years your father cheated, and I held this family together? What about the holidays I spent alone because your new wives didn't like my casseroles? What about the surgery I had, when no one checked on me for 5 days?" The air felt heavy, suffocating. "I stayed quiet all these years to protect your picture of a perfect family," I said. "But I'm not protecting you anymore." I turned to Lily. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "In here," I said, "are copies of every letter I wrote to your father during the divorce. The ones where I begged him not to poison you against me. The ones where I warned him what it would do to our children." Then I reached into my handbag and removed another folder. "These," I said softly, "are photos, bruises, empty bank statements, proof of what I survived while smiling through birthdays and graduations." Madison was crying openly now. Claire looked like she might collapse. "I didn't invite you here to destroy you," I said gently. "I invited you to finally free myself." I sat down. My hands trembled, but I felt lighter, as if I'd finally set down a weight I'd been carrying for 40 years. No one spoke until Lily quietly turned off the camera. Then Madison stood. "I didn't know, Grandma," she whispered. "I swear. I didn't know." "I know," I said softly. "But now you do." The dinner ended early. No speeches. No laughter. They left in small, quiet waves. A few kissed my cheek. Most didn't. Lily stayed behind to help clean up. Her eyes shone with unshed tears. "You were incredible," she whispered. "I was honest," I corrected. She smiled. Same thing. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I had spoken the truth, broken the silence. But I could feel something else stirring, something deeper, older. I wasn't finished. Not even close. The next morning my phone rang, sharp and insistent. Claire's name lit up the screen like a warning. I let it ring. Twice. 3 times. Then I answered. "Hello, Mom," she said, her voice brittle. "We need to talk about last night. That performance." I sat up slowly. "You mean the truth? You humiliated us," she snapped. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this family?" I closed my eyes. "What I've done, Claire, is stop pretending we were perfect." There was a pause. Then a click. She hung up. I placed the phone down and stared out the window. Gray clouds rolled in heavy with rain, but I wasn't afraid of storms anymore. Later that day, Lily returned from town, arms full of boxes. "What's all this?" I asked. She set them on the table and opened one. Inside were manila folders, documents I hadn't seen in decades, bank records, legal filings, and a single letter with my name typed neatly at the top. "I went to the county archives," she said, "and I found something." She handed me the letter that it was dated May. My mother's handwriting. "Dear Eleanor, I've changed my will. The farm is yours. I should have done this sooner, but I couldn't bear to hurt your brother. Still, it belongs to you. You stayed. You sacrificed." My throat tightened. I remembered that letter. I'd found it after her funeral, tucked inside her Bible. I'd shown it to my ex-husband. He told me it wouldn't matter. Told me not to fight. I believed him. "He never filed it," Lily said. "He buried it. Legally, the will is still valid." I stared at her. "What?" "The farm is yours, Eleanor. We just need to challenge the transfer. I already spoke to a lawyer." My heart thundered. That farm wasn't just land. It was memory. Legacy. Where my father taught me to fish. Where my mother baked pies every 4th of July. He'd stolen it with a lie. I stood so fast my chair scraped the floor. "Call the lawyer," I said. "Let's bring it all into the light." The storm gathered quickly. My ex-husband, Dr. Charles McCarthy, called me himself, something he hadn't done in years. "Eleanor, don't do this," he snapped. "You'll embarrass the family. Think of the kids." "The kids you turned against me?" I asked. Silence. "You stole from me," I said. "You made me feel small for decades. And now I'm taking it back. You don't know what you're starting." I smiled. "Oh, Charlie. For the first time in my life, I do." Court began within the month. Lily and I dug through every scrap of evidence. She even uncovered an old voicemail where Charles admitted the will had been misplaced. The courtroom was cold. Claire sat stiffly in the gallery. Madison didn't come. Charles looked smaller now. Older. No charm left, just bitterness. My lawyer laid everything out with precision. Then she handed the judge my mother's letter. He read it carefully. "Mrs. McCarthy," he asked, "do you believe your mother intended this farm to be yours?" I stood. "I don't just believe it," I said. "I know it. And I would have fought for it sooner if I hadn't been gaslit into believing I didn't matter. But I do matter. And I'm not invisible anymore." The room went silent. Then the judge nodded. "I find in favor of the petitioner." The gavel fell. Just like that, the farm was mine. Outside, reporters waited. I gave one statement. "I'm not here to ruin reputations. I'm here to reclaim my own." 2 weeks later, I stood on the land where I was born. The house was worn, the garden overgrown. But to me it was sacred. The air smelled of honeysuckle and damp pine in memory. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time in years, my heart felt whole again. I walked the length of the property line slowly, letting memory guide my steps. Summers spent chasing fireflies with my brothers. Winters curled close to the fireplace while Mama read aloud from her old, worn books, her voice thick and sweet like molasses. I remembered barn dances, burnt pies, laughter, tears. Every moment returned to me. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel fractured. I felt whole. The next morning, Lily arrived bursting with energy, a notebook stuffed with ideas and excitement lighting her eyes. "We could restore it," she said, barely pausing for breath. "Turn the house into a retreat. A place for women, workshops, healing spaces. Somewhere women like me, can finally exhale. I hadn't even finished my coffee before she'd spread sketches across the kitchen table. I was just thinking about fixing the porch swing, I teased. But her idea settled into my chest and stayed there. A safe place. A beginning. Not just for me, but for every woman I'd met who had been erased. The ones known only as someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's shadow. I placed my hand over hers. Let's do it. We started small. Ripping out old flooring. Replacing windows. Painting trim. Neighbors showed up with tools. Even the mayor stopped by one afternoon. It's good to see this place alive again, he said. It was. So was I. Then the phone rang. It was Madison. Her voice broke before she finished saying hello. Grandma, can I come see you? I hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Of course. She arrived 2 days later wearing jeans and a hoodie, her hair pulled back, no makeup. No polish. Just a young woman, my granddaughter, standing nervously on the same porch where I once rocked her to sleep. I didn't understand, she said quietly. What you went through. What you carried. I was cruel. And I'm so sorry. She pulled something from her pocket. A frame. Inside was the printed message thread. The one where she'd called me basic. But beneath it, written in her own hand, were new words. I was wrong. You're not basic. You're the foundation. And I'm proud to be your granddaughter. My chest ached. I pulled her into my arms. Thank you, I whispered. That means more than you know. She stayed for days. Helped clean. Cooked meals. Asked real questions about my childhood, the marriage, the years I never spoke of. And I answered, not as a grandmother. Not as a victim. But as Eleanor. One evening as the sun dipped low over the fields, we stood beneath the old oak tree where Mama once tied ribbons every spring. I've been thinking, Madison said softly. Maybe I don't want the big wedding. The spectacle. I smiled. Oh, maybe I just want truth. Family. A chance to do it right. I said nothing. I just took her hand. That night I danced alone in the living room. Jazz crackled through the old radio. At Last by Etta James drifted through the air. I swayed slowly, arms open, tears falling freely. Because at last I was seen. At last I was whole. At last I was me. And I knew deep down this was only the beginning. The morning of the wedding arrived smelling of magnolia and fresh-cut grass. There was no church. No cathedral. No grand hall. Instead, the farm bloomed. Behind the old barn we created a garden chapel. Linen and wildflowers. Sunlight pouring through the trees like a blessing. Mama's oak tree stood tall. Wrapped now in white silk and memory. Madison wanted to be married here. Simple. Honest. Real. No crystal centerpieces. No rented illusions. Just family. Redemption blooming in unlikely soil. Guests arrived laughing. Hugging. Remembering. I stood on the porch beside Lily, watching them take their seats. You ready? She asked. I've never been more ready. Just before the ceremony, a courier arrived with a thin envelope, handwritten. No return address. Inside was a letter from Charles. You were right. I never saw you as you were, only as someone I could control. When you stopped being that, I resented you. I know forgiveness may be impossible, but truth isn't. I'm stepping away. I've sold my share. Enclosed is a check. It isn't enough, but it's something. I've told the children everything. Do with it what you will. I stared at the check, not for its value but for its meaning. Not justice. Not revenge. Recognition. I slipped the letter into my Bible beside Mama's will. 2 women. Both betrayed. Both redeemed. Then the music began. Madison appeared barefoot at the aisle's edge, holding wildflowers. She looked directly at me, not past me, and mouthed thank you. Tears fell as she walked toward Evan. They spoke vows they'd written themselves, about humility, forgiveness, courage. Madison spoke my name. I dedicate this day to my grandmother, Eleanor McCarthy. She taught me that dignity isn't about appearances. It's about truth. And that love doesn't come from perfection. It comes from courage. The applause came before the kiss. Later, Lily pressed an envelope into my hand. The State Film Commission, she said, smiling. They want to fund the full documentary. They're calling it Basic No More. The story of Eleanor McCarthy. I laughed through my tears. That night we danced beneath the stars. Madison, Lily, even Claire, who held me tightly and whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't see you sooner." We didn't talk about the past. We didn't need to. It lived in the soil, in the music, in the laughter circling back like fireflies. As the candles burned low, I sat in my old rocking chair watching the light fade. 66 years. A lifetime of silence. But not anymore. I was Eleanor McCarthy, and I had finally been heard. 2 months later, the ribbons returned. Madison and I tied them together just like Mama once did. Each ribbon carried a name. A woman helped. A life reclaimed. Angela. Margot. Ginny. They arrived with stories. They left with dignity. We called it the Ribbon House. And it stood as proof that no woman is ever basic, only buried, until she rises. A place where women could begin again. No matter their age, their scars, or the years they'd spent swallowing their voices. Lily took charge of outreach. Madison helped with grant applications. And me? I stood at the gate every time a new woman arrived and greeted her with the same words. "You belong here." One afternoon, as Madison planted lavender near the porch, she looked up at me. "Do you ever wish things had turned out differently?" I gazed across the fields, glowing gold in the late afternoon sun. "I used to," I said quietly. "But if they had, I might never have found my voice. And you might never have found yours." She nodded, thoughtful. "I'm proud to be your granddaughter." Tears stung my eyes. "And I'm proud to be your legacy." That evening I found Lily sitting beneath the oak tree, her camera resting in her lap, eyes lifted to the sky. She looked tired but peaceful. "They accepted the documentary," she said softly. "Sundance. We're all going." My heart leapt, not because of the name or the prestige, but because our story was about to travel far beyond these fields. To women still living in silence. Women who believed they were too old, too plain, too broken to rise. "They're going to hear your voice, Eleanor," Lily whispered. I squeezed her hand. "And they're going to hear yours too." On the morning of the premiere, I stood before a mirror in a modest hotel room in Utah. I wore a navy suit, mama's pearls, and carried every version of myself inside me. The frightened girl, the silenced wife, the woman who finally stood tall. We walked the red carpet together. Lily, Madison, and me. Cameras flashed. Applause echoed. But my thoughts drifted home to ribbons swaying in the breeze. The theater was full. Tears fell. Applause rose. A standing ovation followed. But the moment that stayed with me came during the Q&A. An older woman stood at the back, silver curls framing her face, hands trembling. "I haven't spoken to my daughter in 20 years, she said, voice breaking. "But tonight, I think I will." I met her eyes. That was the reason. That was the miracle born from decades of pain. When we returned to the farm, a letter waited on the porch swing. No signature. Just 6 words written carefully. "I see you now. I'm sorry." I pressed it to my chest and smiled through my tears. Because I was no longer waiting to be seen. I had become the woman I needed. I tied one final ribbon to the oak tree, bright red, the color of fire and rebirth, and wrote, "Eleanor McCarthy. Survivor. Matriarch. Free." Then I turned toward the house, toward the laughter spilling out, toward the life still unfolding, and walked forward. Finally whole. Finally heard. Finally home. 1 year later, the farm pulsed with life. Children chased chickens across the yard. Women laughed around fire pits. Gospel hymns drifted from the porch on the evening breeze. The Ribbon House had grown into something none of us had imagined. Not just a refuge, but a movement. For cabins now stood on the land. A greenhouse. A craft barn. And a circular space we called the voice room, where women sat together and finally spoke the truths they'd buried for years. I'd never seen broken pieces form something so complete. And yet, each sunset still gave me pause. Because despite everything, the film, the farm, the forgiveness, I still hadn't heard from Claire. Not since the wedding, until one evening as I locked up the community pantry, a familiar car pulled into the drive. Claire stepped out. No pearls. No polished mask. Just jeans, a windbreaker, and a vulnerability I hadn't seen since she was small. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Claire." She stood quietly, taking in the land she'd once known and forgotten. I've watched the documentary, she said. More than once. I can't believe what I refused to see. You were a child, I said gently. No, she replied. I was an adult. I chose convenience over truth. She pulled out an old photograph, me holding her as a baby in front of the farmhouse, smiling and exhausted. You were everything I needed, she whispered. And I let that be taken from you. I took her hand. You can't change the past. But you're here now. Tears fell as she nodded. Do you think I could help here? Maybe in the kitchen. I pulled her into my arms, holding her the way I once had during thunderstorms. You don't have to ask, I said. This is your home too. That night, we sat side by side on the porch beneath the stars. Not broken mother and daughter, but two women healing. Inside, Madison rocked her newborn by the fire, my first great-grandchild. She named him Elliot. Lily sat on the floor, reading submissions for her new podcast, Letters from the Ribbon House. Stories poured in from women across the country, because someone like them had survived. Outside, the oak tree stood beneath the moonlight, branches heavy with ribbons, each one sacred. I closed my eyes and breathed, and for the first time I felt it. Peace. The kind that comes only after you've told the full truth, survived the storm, and learned how to dance again. As fireflies blinked back to life, I whispered. I was never too basic. I was just too much woman for people who couldn't see me. But now they do. 5 years had passed since the first ribbon. 5 years since the farm was nothing but weeds and a broken swing. I had been something like that too. Now watching families spill across the lawn, children laughing, silver hair catching the sun, I knew every silence, every heartbreak, every closed door had led here. We just returned from Washington, D.C. The Ribbon House Initiative had received a national award for community healing. Lily spoke through tears. Madison stood beside her, baby Elliot on her hip. I stood behind them, hand over my heart. The town welcomed us home with banners, pies, and open arms. The paper called it the redemption of Eleanor McCarthy. But I wasn't searching for redemption anymore. I was building a legacy. One quiet afternoon, I walked toward the oak tree, the oldest soul on the farm. The breeze was gentle, jasmine hung heavy in the air. And as my fingers brushed one of the ribbons, a realization settled deep inside me. I didn't want to leave behind only memories. I wanted to leave behind voices. For every Eleanor who had lived unseen. For every woman who had learned to shrink herself into silence. That was the day I began writing my book. I called it Ribbons in the Wind. How I took my life back. The words came like a flood. Years of quiet pain reshaped into truth. I wrote about Charles. About Claire. About betrayal, denial, and the cost of staying silent. But I also wrote about the moment I stopped asking for permission to exist. I wrote about joy. About Elliot's first birthday. How his tiny arms wrapped around my neck as he whispered my name. About Madison standing on a conference stage and saying, "My grandmother's fire saved us all." About Claire standing before a circle of survivors at the farm, her voice trembling as she told her own story, no longer ashamed, finally free. The book was published the following spring. It became a quiet bestseller, but more than that, it became a lifeline. Letters arrived from Kansas, New Mexico, Ohio. Women in their 60s, 70s, even 90s wrote to me. They told me they had left unhappy marriages, reached out to estranged children, picked up paintbrushes again, started living again. One woman wrote, "Your story didn't just change my life. It gave it back to me." I kept every letter in a box I named the Second Chances drawer. Then one crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves drifted across the porch, there was a knock at the door. Charles stood there, older now, shoulders bent, holding white lilies in trembling hands. "I don't deserve a moment of your time," he said softly. "But I needed to tell you I was wrong. About everything." I looked into his eyes and saw two men at once, the one I once loved and the one who failed me. "I forgave you a long time ago," I said gently. "But I'll never forget what you taught me." He looked up. "What was that?" "That I never needed anyone's permission to matter." He placed the flowers in my hands. "Goodbye, Eleanor." "Goodbye, Charles." I watched him walk away, not with bitterness but with peace. That night, beneath a sky scattered with stars, Lily, Madison, little Elliot, and I tied one final ribbon to the oak tree, pure white, the color of truth. It read. She rose in silence, and the world finally listened. I looked at the family we had built from broken pieces and light and knew something with certainty. Not every story ends in tragedy. Some end in triumph. Mine did. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was honored. They once told me I was too basic. Now they called me legendary on my 72nd birthday. The sky opened with a slow golden rain. The kind that feels more like a blessing than weather. Madison insisted on a celebration. Long tables stretched across the lawn, draped in white lace and wildflowers. Women flew in from across the country. There was laughter, music, tears, stories of healing shared like sacred offerings. But this year felt different. I didn't feel like a guest of honor. I felt complete. I stood before them holding Elliot's hand, 6 years old now, bold and kind and curious. For most of my life, I said, I believed my story was too quiet, too simple, too small. Laughter rippled through the crowd. But now I know the world is held together by women like us. Women who survive, who rebuild, who carry generations without asking for applause. The applause came anyway as the sun dipped low and the cake was cut. I slipped away barefoot to the oak tree. One ribbon remained. Red velvet, soft but unbreakable. In silver ink I wrote, for every woman who was told it was too late. I tied it carefully and looked up. Hundreds of ribbons danced above me. A forest of truth. I sat on the old bench beneath the tree. The same bench where I once cried myself hollow. This time I closed my eyes and gave thanks, for the betrayal, for the silence, for the fire. Because it all led me here. I was no longer just alive. I was enduring. The name Eleanor McCarthy was no longer a footnote. It was a force. A lighthouse. A legacy. As the wind sang through the branches, I laughed softly and whispered to the sky. I was never too basic. I was a storm in a teacup, and they simply weren't ready. Now they are. And they'll never forget me. Early one morning another letter arrived. Thick cream paper. No return address. My name written in elegant, trembling script. I opened it slowly, the way you open something you know will change everything. Inside one line. My name is Margaret. I'm your sister. The world went silent. Margaret. A name buried deep in childhood whispers. A ghost my mother once mourned in the garden. They told me you died at birth, the letter continued. I believed it for decades. Until I saw your name. Your work. The Ribbon House. You look like Mama. You sound like me. Eleanor. I'm your twin. My knees gave out. I sat at the table, heart pounding as if 1,000 locked doors had burst open at once. That night I called the number she left. Ellie. A voice whispered. And just like that, everything aligned. Margaret came to the farm weeks later. 2 women, weathered and wise, staring into a mirror neither knew existed. We hugged for a long time. No words, just tears and time repairing what time once stole. She lives here now, in the guest house by the garden. We rock side by side in the mornings, trading stories we were never allowed to know. She ties ribbons too. One for every year we lost. The final ribbon, gold shining defiant, reads, even time cannot stop the truth. I never imagined I'd find new family at 72. I never imagined my life would open wider still. But here we are. Still becoming. Still rising. Still proving that the best stories refuse to end when the world tells them they should. And mine? Mine has only just begun again. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, subscribe and share your own in the comments. Your voice matters.